The auxiliary research vessel Veilthun descended through the thin, dust-choked atmosphere of Terra 7, its sleek, silver hull reflecting the dull red light of the system's dying sun. Inside, a delegation of artillery scholars, some of the finest minds in the galaxy, gathered in the observation bay, peering down at the desolation below with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. This is what remains of the so-called humans. Arch-Scholar Vasic mused aloud, his four-clawed hands clasped behind his back. He stood tall, his violet-hued exoskeleton gleaming under the soft interior lighting. His peers chuckled, their expressions mirroring his detached amusement. Beneath them stretched a landscape of crumbling skyscrapers, rusted vehicles frozen in time, and shattered roads, long overtaken by creeping vines and thick layers of sediment. The planet, once a beacon of civilization according to ancient galactic records, was now nothing more than a scarred, hollow corpse. The auxiliary had come expecting little more than ruins, just another dead world left behind by a species too weak to endure. Vasic turned to Tilven, a younger scholar who had petitioned to be part of the expedition. The junior researcher's eyes were fixed on his handheld scanner, his crest of sensory tendrils twitching in an unusual pattern. "You seem troubled, Tilven," Vasic noted, amusement tinging his voice. "Did you expect to find something grander?" Tilven hesitated. He was not like the others. Where his peers saw failure, he saw mystery. Something about Terra 7 didn't add up. "The decay is inconsistent," he admitted, his voice quieter than he intended. "For a civilization that supposedly collapsed thousands of cycles ago, many of these structures are intact beyond expectation. Metal degradation, weathering, it doesn't align with the projected timeline." Vasic exhaled in exasperation. "Always the contrarian, aren't you?" He waved a dismissive claw. "Humanity was primitive. Even their failures were inefficient. Perhaps their ruins are just as stubbornly dull as they were in life." Laughter rippled through the scholars, but Tilven wasn't convinced. Something was wrong here. With a slight jolt, the Veilthun settled on the planet's surface. The boarding ramp extended with a hiss of pressurized air, and the scholars stepped onto the cracked pavement of a once thriving metropolis. The air was dry, the scent of rust and decay carried on the weak wind. Towering buildings loomed above them, their facades pockmarked by time and struggle. A broken street sign, half buried in the dust, bore ancient symbols, unreadable to the Celari, yet strangely foreboding. "We'll begin our survey in the central structures," Vasic declared, motioning toward what appeared to be a massive complex with shattered glass windows and faded insignias. "Try not to get lost in sentimentality till then." Lowering the jab, Tilven followed. His scanners pinged anomalous readings beneath the surface, a power signature so faint it shouldn't exist at all. He frowned. If humanity had perished so long ago, what could possibly still be active? Inside the facility, the auxiliaries spread out, stepping over debris and shattered remains of human technology. They poked at consoles with their multi-fingered appendages, chuckling at the outdated interfaces. A reliance on manual inputs, one of them sneered, gesturing to a control panel littered with buttons and levers. Hal quanked. Arsig ran a claw over a layer of dust on a nearby terminal, shaking his head. They never even achieved intergalactic stability. Whatever knowledge they had is useless. A flicker. Tilven froze. His scanner spiked for the briefest moment, an energy signature from below. Before he could react, the lights overhead flickered. A low hum vibrated through the floor. The scholars stopped laughing. "Did you see that?" one murmured. Another light flickered. A distant metallic groan echoed through the ruins. Tilven's breath caught as his scanner began beeping erratically. Clay was waking up. Vasek stiffened, his arrogance faltering for the first time. His voice, once dismissive, now held a note of unease. Impossible. The flickering light overhead stabilized, casting eerie illumination over the dust-choked ruins. The Kelari scholars hesitated for a brief moment, then exchanged amused glances. "A failing power cell," one of them scoffed, tapping a claw against the rusted wall panel. "Residual energy, nothing more." Vasek straightened, shaking off the brief unease. "A malfunction, clearly. Hardly worth our concern." He turned to the others with a smirk. "Shall we continue mocking this forgotten species?" Laughter rippled through the group again, though it lacked the same conviction as before. Still, they pressed forward, weaving between fallen beams and shattered glass. The remains of human technology were strewn everywhere. Datapads, corroded weapons, strange devices whose purposes were long lost to time. Tilven lingered near a row of dead consoles, running his fingers over the dusty interfaces. Canna continued picking up faint pulses of energy, each stronger than the last. His peers were too caught up in their arrogance to notice. At the center of the facility stood a massive circular chamber, lined with thick metal walls, their surfaces dented and scorched. A battle had taken place here. Tilven crouched beside the remains of a weapon unlike anything in Tesselari databases. Was blocky, metallic, crude in its simplicity, and yet its design exuded a raw sense of lethality. He traced the faded markings along its barrel. These weren't ceremonial relics. These were the weapons of a species that fought until the end. Tilven quit admiring the garbage. Vasek's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You look at this wreckage as if it holds meaning." Tilven hesitated. "Perhaps it does." He gestured at the walls, at the precise, concentrated scorch marks burned deep into the metal. This place wasn't abandoned, it was defended. Vasek snorted, stepping past him toward the center of the chamber. He nudged a collapsed chair with his foot and chuckled. "From what?" "Wind." Humans barely managed to escape their own atmosphere before their inevitable extinction. There was no one to invade them. Tilven frowned. Then what were they fighting? Asik didn't bother answering. He had already turned his attention to a large cylindrical machine, its metal casing cracked open to reveal tangled wiring and shattered conduits. A group of Telari scholars gathered around it, poking at its damaged internals. "Inferior," one of them muttered. They were still using metallic circuitry when they fell. Their understanding of energy distribution was rudimentary at best. Another plucked a broken device from the floor, some kind of small, handheld tool. "It's almost sad," he mused, clicking his mandibles. They truly believed they could advance beyond their limits. Asik chuckled and placed a claw against a nearby console. The great human empire. His voice dripped with mock reverence, crushed under the weight of its own insignificance. Then the console lit up. Kasich jerked his hand back as a faint, pulsing glow spread across the interface. The chamber filled with a sudden, low thrumming sound, vibrating through the metal floor beneath them. The scholars froze. "Did you do that?" one of them whispered. Vasek didn't answer. He took a slow step backward, his previously smug expression now betraying uncertainty. The blow intensified, spreading like veins of fire across the ruined systems. A deep mechanical groan reverberated from below. Tilven's heart pounded. His scanner, once merely flickering, was now screaming warnings. This is not residual energy," he breathed. "Something is reactivating." The hum grew louder, the floor shuddering beneath their feet. Screens that had been dark for centuries blinked to life, flashing incomprehensible warnings in ancient human text. The chamber shook. Other scholars stumbled back. "We should leave." "For once," Tilven agreed, "I actually think that's a good idea." But before anyone could move, the sound of metal grinding against metal echoed through the ruins. From the far end of the chamber, something shifted. A section of the wall, no, a door, began to slide open. Beyond it, in the darkness, something stirred. A voice, cold and artificial, cut through the air. Unauthorized presence detected. Tilven's blood ran cold. The Xelari had come to laugh at ghosts. But the ghosts were still here. The grinding of metal sent a sharp tremor through the chamber as the hidden door slowly parted, revealing a pitch-black corridor beyond. The air shifted, a faint current of something old and mechanical spilling out, as if the ruins themselves were exhaling for the first time in centuries. Tilven's sensory tendrils twitched violently. His scanner was now displaying a clear, rhythmic energy pulse, not random fluctuations, not residual decay, but something active, controlled, alive. Asik took a cautious step forward, his previous bravado visibly shaken. "This is unexpected." "No," Tilven murmured. "This is wrong." Words had barely left his mouth when the floor shuddered again, this time more forcefully. From deep within the exposed corridor, an ominous hum began to rise, its frequency building into a low, bone-rattling vibration. The other auxiliary scholars stumbled back, their amusement now replaced by weariness. This structure was dead. One of them whispered, "How is it?" A sudden burst of red light flooded the corridor as old recessed panels flickered to life, casting jagged shadows along the ancient walls. The illumination revealed something deeply unsettling. The corridor was not abandoned. Lining the walls, hidden behind layers of dust and sediment, rows of human constructs stood in eerie silence. Machines. Their designs were unlike anything the Xelari had ever encountered. Tall, humanoid figures, constructed from thick armor plating, their surfaces worn but intact. Some stood partially buried in collapsed debris, while others remained upright, locked in what seemed like centuries of silent vigil. And one of them moved. The subtle shift was barely perceptible at first, a twitch in the fingers of a long dormant gauntlet, the slow tilt of a helmeted head. But it was enough. The scholars tensed, their instincts screaming at them to flee. Tilven swallowed hard, his mind racing. "These aren't statues," he whispered. "The machines were waking up." A sudden, piercing alarm erupted from the consoles, sending a shockwave of sound through the chamber. The human text flashing on the screens translated instantly through the Cellari's auto-deciphering implants. Defense protocol active. Unauthorized biological entities detected. Security clearance denied. Then, in an instant, the machines stepped forward. The nearest construct, easily 3 meters tall, let out a guttural mechanical grind as its joints released centuries of stillness. Its glowing visor flickered, then locked onto the Cellari. Asik stumbled backward. "That's impossible." Another machine came online, then another. Of the scholars panicked, slamming a clawed hand onto his wrist console, trying to activate an emergency teleport beacon. "We need to get out of here." The beacon fizzled. Nothing happened. Tilven's mind raced. Electromagnetic suppression. The facility was jamming their technology, overriding their tools just as effortlessly as it had reawakened its own systems. And then the largest construct stepped fully into the light. It was different from the others, taller, broader, its armor reinforced with plating that still gleamed beneath the dust of ages. Its helmet bore no visible insignia, but the air around it carried a weight unlike anything Tilven had felt before. It lifted its arm. The plating shifted, and from its forearm a weapon emerged, something unlike any of the rusted relics Cellari had mocked earlier. This was functional, operational, ready. A cold, mechanical voice echoed from its core. "You were warned." Then it fired. A pulse of blue-white energy erupted from the construct's weapon, striking the ground mere meters from the Cellari. The impact was instant and devastating, a controlled blast, sending shrapnel and debris flying through the air. The sheer concussive force sent the scholars reeling, knocking them to the ground. Tilven gasped, his chest heaving as he struggled to process what was happening. These weren't mindless sentries. They had assessed the situation. They had given a warning shot. And that meant one terrifying truth. These machines were thinking. Asik, shaking with adrenaline, turned to the others. "Retreat. Now." But before anyone could scramble for the exit, the doors behind them slammed shut. A cold realization settled over Tilven as he stared at the towering sentinels, now fully active and standing between them and any hope of escape. The Cellari had come expecting ruins. Instead, they had trespassed into a fortress that was never meant to be entered, and the Guardians were not willing to let them leave. The reinforced doors slammed shut behind the Cellari scholars with a deafening clang, sealing them inside the ancient human facility. Dust plumed into the air, mixing with the residual heat from the machine's warning shot. Tilven barely had time to register what had happened before a mechanical voice rang through the chamber once more. "Trespassers detected. You are in violation of Directive Theta 7. The lead sentinel, the taller, reinforced construct, took another step forward, its glowing visors scanning across the group. Its servers whined as it raised its arm again, weapon primed. "Wait!" Tilven yelled, his claws splayed in a universal sign of non-hostility. "We "We're scholars. We mean no harm." For a brief moment, the sentinel paused. The others behind it shifted slightly, their head movements eerily synchronized, glowing visors flickering as if processing new data. Asic, still panting from the shock, turned to him sharply. "Do you actually think they can understand you?" His voice dripped with contempt, but there was no mistaking the fear beneath it. Tilven ignored him, his mind racing. The facility wasn't just reactivating aimlessly, it was assessing them, categorizing them. These machines were not mindless automatons. And that terrified him. Statement acknowledged. The sentinel's voice echoed, and suddenly the pulsing red warning lights shifted to amber. A change, but not a reprieve. Another pulse rippled through the walls, and then something new appeared, holographic projections flaring to life along the chamber's consoles. Tilven turned just in time to see figures materialize in the hazy blue light. Tall, broad-shouldered forms, clad in battle-worn armor. Their features were sharp, their gazes cold and resolute. Humans. And they were speaking. The Xelari scholars froze, their mandibles parting in sheer disbelief. The projection was old, degraded in places, but the voices, they carried weight, command, purpose. "You are hearing this," the hologram stated, its tone calm yet unyielding. "Then that means the last of us have fallen." The room seemed to shrink around them as the meaning settled in. Another human figure stepped forward in the recording. His armor was heavier, his stance radiating absolute authority. The insignia on his chest was unfamiliar to the Xelari, but to Tilven it felt important. "And that means we failed." The scholars exchanged nervous glances. "Failed? Failed what?" The hologram continued. "Humanity was not the first to stand against the Devourers, but we were the last to stop them. If you are watching this, then you have found our final line of defense." Tilven's breath hitched. The Devourers. We species in the galaxy knew that name, an ancient apocalyptic force. A nightmare spoken of in whispers, dismissed as myth and exaggeration. What if it hadn't been? The human commander's voice grew sharp. "To any who trespass here, know this. Our weapons may be silent, but our war is not over." And then the image of the planet itself flared into view, a detailed projection of Terra 7's surface. It flickered, zoomed outward, revealing something buried deep beneath the ruins. Vasic's eyes widened. What is that?" Tilven's scanner pinged, detecting something massive, a power reading that shouldn't exist. The hologram blurred, distorting, but one final message crackled through before it cut to static. "If the Devourers return, Terra 7 will burn before we let them take it." Then the amber lighting shifted, back to red. A mechanical voice followed. Security level escalated, confirming threat status. The constructs moved. Tilven barely had time to react before the nearest sentinel lunged forward. Its arm shot out, impossibly fast, snaring one of the scholars by the throat. The Xelari let out a strangled cry, limbs flailing as the machine lifted him effortlessly. Asic shouted, scrambling back. "They're going to kill us." Tilven's mind raced. "No, not kill. charge. These machines had been programmed for defense, not slaughter. The security escalation wasn't an immediate death sentence, it was an evaluation. And if they failed, then they wouldn't be leaving. Tilven forced himself to move. "We're not your enemies." He stepped forward, ignoring the fear clawing at his chest. "We didn't come to destroy. We came to learn." The sentinel holding the axillary paused, its fingers loosening slightly. For a long moment, the constructs remained still, their red visors burning like cold stars. Then, a new sound. A distant, resonant pulse deep beneath the floor. Tilven's scanner spiked violently. His tendrils quivered. Something else was waking up, and it wasn't human. The pulse from beneath the floor sent a ripple through the facility, a deep, resonant vibration that rattled the walls and echoed through the ancient metal. The sentinels froze mid-action, their glowing red visors flickering in what could only be hesitation. Tilven's scanner screamed warnings, data flooding his display in chaotic bursts. Whatever was activating below, it was not part of the human systems. And the sentinels knew it. One gripping the auxiliary scholar released him abruptly, letting him crumple to the floor with a gasping cough. The machines turned in unison toward the far end of the chamber, where another section of the wall began to shudder violently. Asik, regaining some of his composure, snarled, What is happening?" Tilven didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because the hologram flickered back to life, but this time it was different. The human commander reappeared, his once stern face grim with something darker. Final contingency protocol engaged. A new visual map materialized, not of the surface ruins, but of the underground layers beneath them. And it was moving. Something was rising from below. Tilven barely had time to process what he was seeing before the machines reacted violently. Lead Sentinel turned sharply to face them. "Evacuation required. This world is no longer safe." Tilven's eyes widened. No longer safe? It had already been a ruin. What could possibly be worse than that? The grinding of ancient gears boomed through the floor, and the first cracks appeared in the walls. From the depths below, a monstrous roar rumbled up, deep and alien, vibrating through every molecule in the air. It wasn't mechanical. It was something else. Something alive. Tilven's mind reeled. This was not the decayed remnants of a fallen world. This was a battlefield, and the war had never ended. Vasik grabbed him roughly. "We need to leave. Now." The lead sentinel stepped forward again. Evacuation corridor inaccessible. The ground lurched violently, sending several scholars sprawling. Another holographic screen flashed into existence, displaying a deep underground vault splitting open. The text overlay was unmistakable. Cohen Tnentbreach. The sentinels suddenly moved with purpose. Their hesitation was gone. They turned away from the auxiliary, no longer interested in them, because the true threat had just arrived. Tilven's mind worked furiously, piecing together the implications. The humans had built this facility for war, not against an invasion, but to imprison something. And now that something was free. A horrific shriek erupted from deep within the facility, followed by the sound of metal being torn apart like paper. Then they saw it. From a newly opened fissure in the chamber wall, a mass of writhing black limbs slithered forward, shifting and twisting unnaturally. Chitinous plating, serrated appendages, and too many eyes gleamed in the red emergency lights. A devourer. And it was hungry. Galactic choked on his own breath. That's not possible. They were myths. The devourer lunged. And nearest sentinel met it head-on, moving with a precision and speed that no Celery could match. Its arm cannon fired, unleashing a white-hot energy blast that struck the creature's side, searing deep into its exoskeleton. The devourer shrieked, but it didn't stop. Tilven barely had time to register what was happening before the rest of the sentinels charged forward, engaging the beast with unrelenting force. The Celery had never seen combat like this. These weren't simple machines. They were humanity's last warriors, trained to fight the one enemy even death hadn't defeated. Tilven grabbed his wrist console, desperately searching for any way to escape. The facility's jamming field was still active, preventing any emergency teleport. And the fight was escalating. The devourer lashed out, its bladed appendages slicing through one of the lesser sentinels, shearing off its arm with terrifying ease. The machine staggered but didn't fall, counterattacking with an explosive charge to the creature's underbelly. The entire chamber shook from the force. Galactic screamed, "We're going to die here." Tilven wasn't so sure. The sentinels were still holding. Barely. But if they fell, then the devourer would turn its attention to them next. He forced himself to think. There had to be an exit. His scanner beeped. A secondary energy source had activated above them. A final layer of human security measures. A reactor overload. Tilven's eyes widened. The facility had one last failsafe. If the devourers could not be defeated, then the entire planet would burn. The ground trembled beneath Tilven's feet as alarms blared from every direction. The sentinels were fully engaged, their weapons roaring as they fought to contain the devourer. But no matter how much firepower they unleashed, the nightmare creature kept advancing. The walls cracked, ancient steel groaning under the strain. The facility was failing. Tilven's scanner pulsed with a new warning. The energy spike from above wasn't just an overload, it was a countdown. He barely had time to process before another hologram flared to life, this one far more urgent. The human commander appeared once more, his expression grim and final. Safe Protocol Omega has been activated. The chamber's lights shifted from red to deep violet, bathing everything in an eerie glow. This world is compromised. Full planetary sterilization will commence. Tilven's mandibles tightened. Sterilization. The humans weren't just going to destroy the facility. They were going to erase everything. Galactic staggered forward, clutching his arm where a piece of shrapnel had grazed him. What does that mean? Tilven turned sharply. Means that in a few minutes, this entire planet is going to be turned to ash. Galactic's face twisted in horror. They'd destroy their own world. A ferocious shriek cut through the chamber as the devourer tore through another sentinel, ripping its torso apart with its serrated limbs. Sparks and molten metal spewed into the air, but the sentinels fought on, unrelenting, unwavering. Tilven could hardly comprehend it. These machines weren't just following programming. They were fighting as if they still had something to protect. But it wouldn't be enough. His scanner pinged again. A possible escape route. A secondary maintenance corridor leading up toward the surface ruins. "We have a way out," Tilven shouted. "Follow me." The other Xelari hesitated, eyes flicking between the battle and the exit route now highlighted on their scanners. Then another impact rocked the facility, sending debris crashing down from the ceiling. That decided it. They ran. Tilven sprinted ahead, navigating the ancient passageway as fast as his legs could carry him. The walls were crumbling, cracks splintering outward as the planet's death sentence ticked down. Eyeing them, the sounds of battle grew more distant, but the devourer's roars only intensified. Tilven's mind raced. How had the humans faced these creatures and survived? The galaxy had long dismissed them as a minor species, one that had burned out in its own short-lived violence. But that had been a lie. They had been fighting a war no one else could comprehend. A war against extinction. And they had nearly won. Vasek stumbled beside him, gasping. "The ships! We need to reach the ships." Tilven skidded around the final corner, his scanner confirming. The surface was just ahead. Then, a new alarm blared. He looked up, eyes widening in horror. The fail-safe countdown had reached its final phase. Planetary sterilization in T-minus 60 seconds. Tilven's chest tightened. Not enough time. They would never make it to their ships before. A shadow moved overhead. Tilven barely had time to react before something massive descended from the sky. A ship, but not Xelari. It was human. A colossal, battle-worn craft, its hull still bearing the scars of ancient wars. Engines roared as it hovered over the ruins, deploying a grav lift beam directly into their path. A voice, impossibly human, crackled through the airwaves. "Get in." Tilven didn't hesitate. He leaped into the beam, feeling the pull of artificial gravity yank him upward. Vasek and the others followed, scrambling into the unknown ship just as the ground beneath them began to break apart. As soon as they were aboard, the ship's hatch slammed shut, sealing them inside. Tilven collapsed onto the metallic floor, his entire body shaking. What had just happened? Then, a figure stepped into view. A humanoid form, tall, armored, and breathing. A human. Tilven's mind reeled. They were supposed to be extinct. The human removed their helmet, revealing sharp eyes that had seen war beyond comprehension. They stared at the Xelari, expression unreadable, then simply said, "You shouldn't have come here." And below them, the planet began to burn. The shockwave from the planet's destruction slammed into the ship's hull, rattling it like a leaf caught in a storm. Through the viewport, Tilven saw Terra 7 begin to die, its once grey ruins swallowed by searing plasma detonations, splitting the crust open like a shattered egg. Firestorms roared across the surface, and massive chunks of land broke apart, tumbling into the void. The failsafe had worked. Everything was gone. Hilven forced himself to breathe, to process what had just happened. But his gaze snapped back to the armored figure standing before him, the impossible survivor, the human. They were taller than any Xelari, their build powerful yet scared from untold battles. Their dark, weathered armor still bore the insignia of a long-dead military force. And their eyes, cold, calculating, alive. Vasek was the first to break the silence, stepping forward with barely contained panic. You're human." The figure didn't react. Their gaze swept over the Xelari group, assessing them with the precision of a battlefield commander. Then they spoke, their voice hoarse but steady. "You have no idea what you've done." Tilven's mandibles tightened. "We came to study your ruins. We didn't know." The human laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. "Ruins!" They gestured to the viewport, where the last remnants of Terra 7 crumbled into fire. That was never a graveyard. It was a prison. Silence choked the room. Tilven's stomach twisted. The Devourers. The human's gaze darkened. They were never myths. Vasek stepped back, horror creeping into his voice. "But humanity, your people died fighting them. How are you here? How did you survive?" The human didn't answer right away. Instead, they turned, inputting a command into the ship's control panel. A holographic display flickered to life in the air, showing a galaxy-wide map, but overlaid with pulsating red zones. Tilven recognized the locations immediately. They weren't random. They were war zones. Same regions where ancient human ruins had been found across the stars. Tilven's breath hitched. "No." The human's voice was cold as steel. Terra 7 wasn't the only prison. The realization slammed into Tilven like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just fought the Devourers. They had been containing them. And now one of those prisons was gone. Tilven felt true terror claw at the edges of his mind. How many? The human's expression didn't change. Too many. The weight of the words sank in. For centuries, the galactic community had believed that humanity was an anomaly, a species that had burned out in its own wars. They had been wrong. Humanity had been the last defense, and now that defense was collapsing. Vasek's mandibles clicked in frustration. "But if your people were truly fighting them, why didn't you?" The humans snapped their gaze to him, and for the first time, anger burned in their expression. "Because no one came to help." A heavy silence settled over the room. Tilven felt the accusation strike deep. The galaxy had watched humanity vanish, dismissing them as just another failed species. Their wars had been ignored, their struggles forgotten. And now the cost of that neglect was coming due. The human exhaled, as if pushing down years of rage. They turned away, inputting another command into the ship's system. A new map appeared. It showed a star system far from here, one of the Xelari's outer colonies. and it was flashing red. Tilven's blood ran cold. That's one of ours. The human nodded grimly. Something woke up there too. Vasek staggered back, his voice barely a whisper. The Devourers. They're spreading. The human's jaw tightened. They were never gone. They were waiting. A deep, sinking dread settled over Tilven. The prison was open. The war was beginning again. And this time, humanity wasn't fighting alone. Tilven's hands trembled as he stared at the flashing red system on the holographic map. One of their own colonies, one that had been stable, peaceful, was now marked as a hot zone. His mind reeled. The Devourers had already breached containment. Vasek's breathing was shallow, his voice laced with denial. It could be a malfunction, a false reading. The human's expression remained cold, unyielding. It's not. Tilven swallowed hard, forcing himself to think. The Selari had always believed themselves safe, secure in their knowledge that the galaxy's great wars were long over. But that had been a lie. They hadn't been living in peace. They had been living in ignorance. The Devourers had never been defeated, only contained, and the ones who had done the containing had been written out of history. Anne turned to the human, his throat dry. How many of you are left? The human exhaled, their jaw tightening. Enough to fight, not enough to win. The words hit like a sledgehammer. For all the myths about humanity, all the dismissive arrogance the Selari and other species had held toward them, the reality was far worse. They had fought alone. And now, with the Devourers returning, there was no longer any choice. Tilven took a step forward, his voice steadying. You saved us. You didn't have to. Why? The human's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Because you were never supposed to be part of this. A pause. Then, Quita, and because we failed last time. That admission cut deep. Vasek, still pale, shook his head. If this is true, if the Devourers are spreading, why haven't we seen more signs? There should be reports, sightings. The human cut him off. They don't invade like a traditional army. They pointed to the map. They spread like a plague. They infiltrate, consume, convert. By the time most species realize what's happening, they clenched their fist. It's already too late. Tilven felt his stomach drop. A force that didn't conquer, but infested. That didn't just kill, but converted its enemies into more of itself. If even one Devourer had made it off Terra 7 before the failsafe triggered, then the war had already begun. Tilven straightened. Then we can't afford to waste time. Vasek whirled toward him in disbelief. What are you saying? Tilven looked at the map again, at his people's colony. At the war zone it was about to become. I'm saying we need to fight. Vasek's mandibles clicked rapidly, his distress obvious. Fight? Against that? He gestured toward the viewport, where the last flickering embers of Terra 7 disappeared into the void. We barely escaped with our lives, and you want to go straight into another battlefield. Tilven's voice hardened. If we don't, that colony is doomed. A long silence. Asik's hesitation was obvious, but so was the reality neither of them could deny. Tilven turned back to the human. You've fought them before. You know what we're up against. What do we need to do? The human studied him for a long moment. Then they smiled grimly. We get you some real weapons. 1 hour later, Armory Bay. Tilven ran his hands over the rifle in his grip, its weight far heavier than anything he'd ever trained with. The ship's armory was unlike anything he'd seen. Rows of old but functional human weapons, each designed for a single purpose: total annihilation. Asik, still uneasy, eyed the massive anti-armor rifle slung over his shoulder. This is insane. We're scholars, not soldiers. The human passed by, strapping on their own armor. If you want to live, you'll need to be both. Tilven adjusted his grip, pushing down his unease. Do these weapons even work against them? The human paused. They work long enough for you to run. A grim reality. Gliding the Devourers wasn't about victory. It was about survival. The human finished gearing up and turned toward them. The colony won't know what's coming. If we don't get there first, there won't be anything left to save. Tilven nodded resolute. Whatever arrogance he had once held about humanity's weakness was long gone. They weren't weak. They were the only reason the galaxy had lasted this long. And now it was time to stand with them. The ship's engines rumbled, setting course for the war ahead. For the first time in millennia, humans and aliens would fight side by side. And as the stars blurred past, Tilven made a silent vow. The galaxy had abandoned humanity once. It would not happen again. End of Part 8. To be continued, because you just know the war is only beginning.